they said, we'll teach you financial literacy and financial education. And I said, okay, that's fine. Make some extra money while I learn. Amazing. At that point, I wasn't really working to earn money, just experience, because
Yeah.
I didn't, I was pre-med. In my head, I was going to be a doctor. Right. And I was with them. I ended up changing my career path and was committed full time. And I was with them for, I would say, 2 years, 2.5 years. And I ranked to whatever the RVP, like, they're very big on titles. So I
Yeah.
made it to where, I could say I made it, but there wasn't, I feel like I hit the ceiling. There
Mhm.
was, I felt like I had already used up all my resources there. I knew I was asking more questions than they wanted to answer. So then I had to look for mentorship outside of that. And I actually stumbled upon Unblinded, funny enough.
Nice.
So I had completely exhausted my warm market. I had no one else to talk to. And so I decided to email 150 real estate agents in my area. 4 got back to me. 3 said, screw you, take me off your list. And one of them was like, are you available at 2 p.m.? And I said, yeah, I have nothing to do. Of course I'm available.
Mhm.
So I spoke to her. She got me on what they used to call the Real Raw. So like that game show where you go on with a bunch of other professionals and you go from hello to yes with people. It's like a game show. It's very fun and
Yeah.
interactive.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really fun. I thought it was great. Afterwards, they were trying to sell me a coaching. Now I understand what it is, but a business mastery program. And I wasn't sure, but then I went to see him in person. They were having a 4-day event and they made the first day free. And I said, I could take the drive. So I went. Um, and then that's when I got to experience everything live. And I said, wow, like I like the way they do business. They focused on, communicating communicating with integrity and building a business with people you really like. And I
Yeah.
felt like the tactics that I was taught before was very like forced sales, and it was just money driven, and it felt uncomfortable to me. So I thought that this new approach of, wow, you can build a business and it could be fun and it could be like really like a good experience. Like I want to learn more. And so at that event is where I actually met Rob. So I got to shake his hand, and he's
Yeah.
like, because my coach at the time through Unblinded was like, I think you should meet Rob. He does something in financial services. And I said, okay, I'm open. I was
Yeah.
ready to get off
I'm
this.
here.
Yep, I was ready to get off the boat. I just didn't know what boat I was gonna hop on next. And that's kind of how I got to Epic. He was part of the Unblinded with Sean Callaghy, that whole ecosystem, and it was a perfect fit. I spoke the same language he did, right? And we had values that aligned, and I saw that Epic was doing something very innovative, which I wanted to be a part of, right? What I was taught as far as sales was very old school, was like knock on doors kind of sales. And I knew that wasn't going to be sustainable. So that's kind of how I made it here.
That's awesome. I love the overlaps of like all those things of something as simple as saying like realizing the discomfort that you felt in your position of
Mhm.
like, I'm not going to go where I want to go, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think discomfort oftentimes is like that first marker, like, hey, please change,
Yeah,
adjust,
exactly.
and like the ability to say yes to the discomfort in the way that moves you forward. Like
Yeah.
you said, you didn't really know what was coming next, but you were looking.
Yep.
And man, like the thing that I really love about Sean and the whole unwinded thing is just that like they're not trying to convince anyone. They're like, my
Yeah.
job isn't to convince you of anything. Like, if I have to convince you, then I'm going to keep having to convince you.
Yes.
And it's really like, how can I present the most value to you for yourself? Like, obviously, there's a selfish aspect. Yeah, I want to get paid for my efforts. But it's like, how can I insert value into this situation so that you can insert value into your situation?
Exactly. Yeah.
And having people like that, like overlap, of course it happens.
Yeah. No, and you brought up such a great point of convincing. That's how I was taught how to sell. And, and I would even argue it's not selfish, it's a preference that we have, right? So I do prefer to have you as a client. I wish everyone was my client. Obviously, I wouldn't say no to anyone, but I'm not attached to that outcome. And I really was able to learn that. And I learned that I wasn't a good listener until I realized it's like, oh, okay, I'm level one. So like I have a lot to work on. So it was it was just like a blank slate for me that I got to really kind of work on when it comes to sales, interactions, influence, business, all of that.
How is it? Because you're an anomaly here. I don't know if you've noticed, but how is it that you are willing to make those changes and not be bogged down and stay the one that you discovered you were?
What do you mean?
Well, sometimes people, they don't necessarily look at their life of like it's changeable
Mhm.
or I'm willing to change.
Mm,
What is it about you that gives you the drive, the willingness to change?
that's a great question. I think as a kid, I was always self-motivated. Like I'm very competitive. I played sports in high school and in college. But for me, what was a life-changing situation for me was in 2020, my father passed away from COVID.
Mm,
And that was a huge shift for me. I felt like I was sleeping and then I woke up.
yeah,
Like it was like night and day. When I talk about him, passing away, a version of me passed away with him that no longer exists. Like I came out of that a completely different person. So, that with that kind of pressure, in 2020, the 2 months after he passed, I produced the most I ever had in business because I needed something else to focus on,
right.
right? I exhausted my warm market. That was right before I changed and started working with Epic. So I was really seeking for guidance. I was seeking for positive change because I knew I could not do it by myself. If I was left to my own devices, my mind was taking me down the wrong rabbit hole. So I think I made it a point and I committed to making sure that that event in my life, that something positive came out of it. Because I know people in my life and my family who have had similar things happen. They lost someone really close, their mother, and they're still there emotionally 10 years later. And it was
Yeah.
the scariest thing. I'm like, I can't be that person. Like I have to move on and I can't let this moment define me in a negative way. Right. So that was really that's why that really kind of sparked my journey, like accelerated my journey of personal development. And so that's always where I now go to, right? When
Yeah.
if I'm feeling stuck in business, I'm like, I gotta work on myself. I need to learn something. I gotta read the Bible. I gotta do like something. I need some inspiration from outside of my head because I don't have all the answers, right? So I think it was the shift of I need to get help and I need to invest in myself. Like I put that course, that coaching program on my credit card where I had no
Yeah.
means to be able to do that.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. So I'm like, it's gonna work. Like it has to work. Something has to change, right? So I would say that would be a significant thing that kind of now puts me in more of a constant openness to change.
I love that you said that whenever there is like a hiccup in the train tracks here, that you look at yourself. What are you doing, Alexa? Are you thinking crazy? Are you doing something? Do you need to learn? Like, what's the pivot? How can you capitalize on this? And one of the great things that I talk about in my coaching that I've learned on my own as well is that hardship can be a precursor to glory.
Mm.
If, dot, dot, dot.
Yeah.
Like if,
You
if,
choose.
if I choose, if I look at it the right way, if I surround myself with goodness after the hurt,
Yeah.
if I, all the other negative stuff is just waiting. It's there all the time. Like
Yeah.
we could both just cash out our 401ks and buy a bunch of cocaine and go to Mexico. Like
You have a great weekend.
the options there, right? A great weekend, but like after that, like it's not a life. And I think, whether it's hardship or it's glory, those are also just moments, and like knowing that like, hey, yeah, we can all say that like chapter 4 of my life story sucked, but like I'm on chapter 14, like I'm not there. And I love that you said that emotionally, you just couldn't see yourself as being stuck.
Yeah.
Like, no, dude, I see how terrible that is. I don't want that. And I think oftentimes, it's a lot easier, I think, to know what we don't want than what we do. Because like what we do want, like there's a lot of versions of success,
Yeah.
and a lot of noise when it comes to like, you should want this because X, oh, you're Latina, then you should be this way. Oh, you're this, you should be that way. But knowing what we don't want, I think that's always crystal clear. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be broke. I don't want to be unfulfilled in my job. I don't want to look at outside forces as like controlling my life. What can I do? And I think knowing what you don't want is such a great precursor to finding out what means the most.
Oh yeah. I love that you said that, because that's where usually you should start. It's hard when you're in a bad place to think of these amazing things you want and what your life would look like. It's hard. I mean, it's not an easy thing to visualize, right? So you can start with what you absolutely don't want. And I knew if I stayed stuck, it would be a disservice to what my father stood for. And I said, I don't know but that's not going to be it. So it just made it easier to eliminate some things at least, and start to clear up the path. Right. So I mean, so much has changed since then. It's crazy when you look back. I mean, now it's going to be 4 years? It's been 4 years. So it's been a long time. And I love your story. I've had the privilege of hearing it, and it's like makes my story seem so small. And I'm like, oh my God, if he can overcome something like that, like the mindset that requires is incredible. I love the day one mindset, right? All that matters is right now. Day one today, right? And so many times we're stuck in like how we feel because of what we did or didn't do, and what's going to happen that hasn't even happened yet, right? So I think your story is inspirational, so inspirational.
I think it's just cool, honestly.
It's epic,
Right? It's epic, and yeah, I got it. You're like, yeah, winking a nod to my company. But yeah, like I prayed for an epic life, and God gave me a big challenge. And it's like, I think for me, I was living in a place where I was underwhelmed with my life. Mm. And for some people, they're like, oh man, I don't want to feel overwhelmed. I'm like, I think you do. At least get close to it. Of like, how much can I build? How much can I endure? How much can I learn? How much can I grow? Like having a lot. And I think like my life just didn't matter to me that much. And but it was because I was living a version of my life that wasn't mine. I wasn't choosing any of that stuff. I was just going along. And I think, like you start to make these decisive decisions. Like, I'm going to go this way on purpose. I'm going to go this way on purpose because that way sucked. Like, all right, pivot again. Okay, go. But like when we look at it, I tell my clients all the time, there's only one kind of person that we respect, and it's that person that does pivot, that does look at it as like, I know it sucked, but I'm going to keep going. Or I see it as worthwhile, or, oh, I'm betting on myself. Because we all know that victimhood sucks.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to feel like a victim that like I'm at it's the economy is dictating my personal value and worth. No, it's not. Like your skill level and your story is dictating it, dude.
Yeah.
And I love that I broke my neck and like had no feeling and no movement, because it just proved the importance of the story you tell yourself.
Did you would say that sentence?
Not for a long time.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Like the longer it was out, and the more my decisions and my identities started to like sync up, the more I realized that like I can't be mad at that. What did it lead to? Like it gave me the opportunity, one, to reconcile the relationship with my parents, which that's pretty useful.
Yep.
Since I was like, hey guys, I can't put my own shirt on. Could you help me, please? Not having that contention in the home was like, oh, that's all self-caused. That means I can fix it. Was it easy? No, because a lot of my ego had to die off. And, when God says things like, go tell your dad you love him, I'm like, I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. He's like, I didn't ask. I know you don't want to do that. That's why I'm telling you to do that. And I'm like, fine. And like making those uncomfortable choices sometimes for the better. Yeah. We all can relate to that. Like, I'm sure you've made a lot of uncomfortable conversations. Like, I just gotta say it. I gotta say it. Yeah. And like, I've learned that there's times in your life where you stand up for yourself against other people, but there's more times when you stand up to yourself against yourself. And you're like, no, Alexa, we're doing this. I know you're tired. We're doing it. And like, no one knows that conversation, but you do.
Yeah.
And I found so much value in standing up to myself that like you, it became my default of like, oh, well, duh, I'm going to look to me when I have another challenge,
Yep.
and like co-creating my life with God to the point where I'm no longer making decisions that are based on other people's possible reactions. And like, there's such a freedom there. And like, I think you inadvertently discovered that like listening to you is the thing to do.
Yeah. It no, and thank you for sharing that. How I have a question for you. Like how did it take for, and I may have asked you this before, to really create that where it's almost like your intuition, that nudge or whatever it is, right? That certainty of, yeah, this is the path I'm going and this is what God wants me to do. And even though maybe I don't like it at this moment, but I'm going to trust that this is what he's telling me to do. Like how did you develop that? And is there a routine or something like a trigger or something you do to try to tap into that when you're feeling uncertain?
The thing that made the biggest difference in the beginning that I remember clearly is how quiet it was without all the chaos, without the people that weren't serving me, without the relationships that weren't serving me, without the habits. Like you can't go out and do things your parents don't want you to do if you can't go out and do them,
Mhm.
like physically, I just could not. So it's like a lot of like my habits, negative habits were just gone
Mm.
and doing a lot less, like you're just listening more.
Yeah.
And when all the noise was quiet, the voice of God became so crystal clear. I was like, oh, well, yeah. And like I made things like Sean's always saying, Einstein's like, hey, make things simple, right? And my life just became extremely simple. And from there I built on top of that. But like when my injury happened and like all these months alone, the only things I knew that I liked for sure that Milan was, inspired by was I was like, I like girls, I like clothes, and I like money. Okay, now what? And I used that. I was like, all right, well, I'll study fashion design at my university. And then I ended up studying at another design school in Florida. I'm like, okay, mind you, this is the year after breaking my neck. And like, my body's like, I don't know if I want to do stuff yet. And I'm like,
Mm.
come on, body, it's fine. We'll figure it out. And 23 years later, like my hands are still tight and like it's difficult to do stuff, but it's like none of that mattered anymore.
Yeah.
And like I realized the question I was asking myself was, do I respect myself more or less if I do this thing?
Mm.
And even when it's hard and I don't understand, I respect myself more if I do it because I'm having that conversation with me, not anybody else.
Right.
And like scripture says, you fulfill the secret desires of your heart. Nobody knows all the little details. You
Yeah.
know. And like I built such a rapport with myself that I began to trust myself over everything.
I love that.
And it just became just so obvious, like, well, duh. And like I got braver and braver and braver and like, started recording my podcast like 5 years ago with like a crappy microphone and just like talking into it, in the dark and stuff. And like gradually, thankfully, the AI has helped with the editing. But it's like, just like that, it's like, it's my life at a weird angle is the podcast. It's like, yeah, it's my life. And I think the biggest hack for everybody is to pay attention and take notes.
Yep.
To yourself. And, throughout history, the things that we pay attention to are the things that we want to remember. And it's like, if you're only paying attention to stuff that you don't want to remember, your life is going to reflect that. But if you're paying attention to the stuff that you do want to remember, then your life will reflect that also. And, like when you're talking about Sean and talking about meeting Rick or talking about doing all these things, it was such a joy in your eyes and in your face because you know where it led.
Yeah.
And your intentions in those moments of just like, yeah, I was betting on me. Like, okay.
Yeah.
I asked for new and different. I guess this is new and different.
Yeah. I think that's the most and thank you for that because it's true. Those are my moments I anchor to where I'm like, you see, it worked out at that point. Like you didn't
Yeah.
know what the hell you were doing. You didn't know if you had no idea, but you said yes and you did your part. You just showed up. And Rob talks about it all the time when he talks about how because I was still with him for a whole year until I made it kind of like to the table with him and internally and doing things aside from just the sales part. And so he's like, you showed up for it. You were the first one in, last one out. Your actions dictated like, oh, she's still around. Like what, maybe I'll ask her a question and see what her thoughts are about this. Right. And you start to become a part of the conversation, which, I've learned proximity is power. It
Oh, yeah.
is like who you're around really dictates your habits. It dictates your income. It dictates your health, everything, because you feed off of each other. Um, and also just being around gave me the opportunity to sit at the table, right? If I had given up a year in and said, wow, like, you know, this is not going the way I want, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I'm thankful every day for that because I stuck to it.
Yeah.
Easy.
And now, like the next time entrepreneurs and people in this business, any high achiever like we are, it's like the more that you do that and the more that you behave that way, the less information you need to make another big decision.
Yeah.
And I think when like the lesser version of myself needed so much information and was asking so many questions for like something that costs $100. Like, dude, what? Stop it. You're playing way too small. You can't tell. But like when like I work with my clients, like my coaching program starts at 5,000. And it's like that's a different caliber of person.
Yeah.
And they expect a different caliber of service. And it's great. It's like we're all raising our expectations. And something I learned along the way is God will meet you at your level of authentic expectation. Like if you have yourself in high expectation of what this is going to mean for your life, then like you'll get ideas and people and circumstances and emotions that fuel that. And it's cool. It's weird that like you can control your own life by controlling your own story.
Mm.
And it's so fantastic. And I remind people the first thing that God did in scripture is he let the light in. Are
Yeah.
you letting the light in? Like with your words and your story and your belief and your ideas and your action, like, are you letting the light in? Like the darkness is just there. It's just there.
And it will always be there.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that, if you're dealing with, oh, where are you? Oh, there you go. Sorry. Someone called and it stopped. If you're dealing with grief or if you're dealing with hardship or anything, it won't ever disappear. Like you'll always have pain from that experience if it was traumatizing, if it was tragic, but you have to like overflow with positive
Yeah.
and other experiences, like you said, that you want to remember to make them small. So it never goes away. Right? Because people ask me all the time, like, how are you? I'm great. I'm great. I mean, I'm still miss my dad every day. Think about him all the time. But it's not something that controls my entire view of life. It's just I just keep stacking good things on top. So it seems a lot smaller than it is. Right. And like you said, letting the light in. It's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Like I saw this video, and there was like a bunch of like dirt, I think, in the bottom of this cup and like a little bit of water. Like the water obviously looked pretty doggone dirty. But then she just like cut the faucet on. And like the more pure, good stuff flowed in, like if you just keep on with that flow, like the dirt just filtered itself out.
Yep.
And I think it's almost like you have to overload yourself with good in order to get out of that. It's like, yeah, like insights come from people who have experienced darkness and made their way out, not from people that never went into the darkness.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, my life sucked. And then I did this, and we all have those challenges. And it's like, dude, success leaves clues, man. There's clues all around. If you don't stop and you choose to surround yourself with good people, like good things will happen to you.
Yeah.
And like, I love the time that we're living in because even if you have no access whatsoever to anyone that's doing something worthwhile, you still have the internet.
Yeah.
Like I've learned so much from like Jay Shetty's podcast or, from like connecting with Unblinded, even before I went out to New Jersey. And it's like these things are available. Listen to my podcast, doggone it. It's great.
Yeah.
It's inspiring. And it's like, you can create this life and it's weird that it's based on the story that you believe. The story that Alexa was telling Alexa about Alexa is the story that like you either fueled you or didn't.
Yeah. And honestly, it's the only one that matters. And that's, I think, something that's so hard to learn and to really accept, because we naturally want validation from outside, right? We want our friends and family to tell, good job, great, I'm proud of you. But whether they do or not, it's your opinion of yourself and your story, and what you tell yourself should be and is the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
And with social media, I say it's a blessing and a curse. There's a beautiful amounts of information. I'm so happy I grew up without it, and then like kind of progressively got access to social media and the internet. I look at like my nieces and nephews, and that's all they know. And
Yeah.
it's like, it comes with, then what is real? What is good information, right? Because we have now an overload of information. So we want to make sure that it's the right kind, right? That you're feeding your brain something positive. So that's another way to look at it.
Right. Because, like, I remind people that our entire being is porous. Just like when you put lotion on your skin and it soaks in, like your brain, your being, your thoughts, everything about you is porous. Like you're absorbing stuff, and reminding yourself, like, well, what am I absorbing? Like, even if you think, like, oh, it's just this. Okay. Okay. You say that, but I've been your age. You haven't been my age. I know about it.
Yes. Yes.
I've introduced negativity into my life, and I was like, oh, dang, my life is negative. Like,
Mm,
doggone it. Maybe I should do something different.
yeah.
Um, Side question though, like, what sports did you play younger? And
Oh,
are you still athletic?
I'm still athletic. I love sports. I love working out. But when I was young, I played like tennis. I was a very aggressive kid, but I played lacrosse for 7 to 8 years. I played in
Okay.
high school, played in college, and I would say that's like my favorite sport. I mean, it was something I learned from level zero that I picked up really quick, and I went from never picking up a lacrosse stick in my life to playing in college, which for me was a huge accomplishment, because in the city, like I'm from Queens, New York, they don't really play lacrosse. Like no one plays lacrosse.
No,
That's more of like Long Island or like out in other towns where there's just more space. It's not an inner city sport.
no.
So
Yeah,
so lacrosse.
you can't really fling that ball back and forth like 10 feet.
No,
Like
no.
you need a
Maybe
whole.
on a handball court. I used to practice on the handball court,
Yeah,
but that's it.
I've heard it said that girls who are introduced to sports tend to be more self confident and have more self worth and look less for validation outside of themselves. Have you found that to be true?
I definitely think it has. When I went to college, it was the first time I learned to lift, like weights and, Olympic lifting, and I got a lot stronger. So for me, that was something I was very, very proud of. Like I can walk into a gym, I know how to use the equipment, I'm not going to hurt myself. And you feel really good. And that's something I think all women should experience, because there's a lot, and even though it's definitely changed, there's so many women that go to the gym and they're killing it. But for a long time it was strange, right? It was like a man's world in the gym, and only the guys did the weights and the girls did the treadmill, right? And so things have definitely shifted, but it's a level of confidence of, I know how to do this, I got this, and a level of discipline and pushing yourself. Like I think your discipline and health can really overflow into all parts of your life, in business, in your relation. I mean, everywhere, everything, because it comes from a self-love thing too, right? Self-discipline, doing what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, and the great thing I love about being athletic and working out is no one can say they did it for you.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So like if it's there or it's not, it's all on you.
Oh yeah.
And that's the great part. It's like it adds another layer, I think, of ownership to our life, which is
100%.
it's fantastic.
Yes. And then for women, I think we're always like trying to look really aesthetically pleasing, and like we gotta look really good. And as all young women I'm sure experience, I was so hard on myself. I look at pictures, I'm like, oh, I was cute. Like, why was I so mean to myself? But you know, even if I'm not perfect, I worked for this. Like I put in the work to look the way I look. So I'm proud of it. So, even if I don't look like Kim Kardashian, I'm like, hey, but I could do 25 push-ups if you ask me right now. And can you?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's like, it's the rapport. Like I'm proud of myself.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think when you're proud of yourself, you're looking for it in a lot less places.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that attracted me to my wife, is that she was confident in herself, not looking for validation for other people. She's like, I've learned to not need it. And
Okay.
you've also learned to like do the things and not wait for other people to agree or go along. And oddly enough, like her whole life blossomed because she wanted to go to a concert, and her friends kept, making plans and then canceling. And she was like, F this, I am not missing another concert.
Who did she go see?
Trey songs.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
So he was chasing a guy from Virginia and ended up marrying a guy from Virginia. So you're welcome.
I love that.
Turns out she wanted a guy from Virginia the whole time. She just was wanting the wrong guy.
It's all right. She found you.
You're right. We can still listen to Trey songs.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
He's
fine.
amazing.
I'm not intimidated by it.
Yes, yes. That's the best part.
But thank you so much for your time. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll do all the editing and stuff, and it'll be live Thursday on Spotify.
Okay, awesome. Send it to me. I'll listen. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I'm happy I got to have this conversation with you after a crazy weekend, it seems.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's a lot going on.
a lot happening. A lot happening. It's good though sometimes.
It is. All right. I appreciate you. We'll be in touch.
Bye. Have a great day.
Bye.